Are you a software developer thinking about jumping into cloud engineering? Well, good news, you are in the right place. And even better news, cloud computing is booming. It's one of the most rewarding and high-paying areas in tech right now. So yeah, definitely worth looking into. But before you dive in head first, there are a few things you should know to make sure you're not totally lost in the clouds. Pun intended. In this video, I'm breaking down the 5 most important things you need to think about before making the leap into cloud engineering. Stick around because later on I'll also be sharing 2 tips I picked up along the way that'll make this switch a whole lot smoother for you. Quick intro for those who don't know me. I'm Emmer, a certified solutions architect for both Azure and AWS, which is just a fancy way of saying I help companies build stuff in the cloud. Before that, I spent years, decades actually, but who's counting, in software development. So I get what it's like to make this transition. I'm here to share what I've learned to help you make your move a success. Ready? Let's jump right in. Switching from software development to cloud engineering means expanding your existing coding skills and learning some new ones. For example, as a developer, you're likely comfortable with Python, Java, or C#. These are great starting points because cloud platforms like AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud all support these languages in their services. But cloud engineering is much more than coding. One big area you'll need to focus on and focus on early is networking. In the cloud, networking is everything. You'll need to understand how IP addressing, subnets, DNS, and load balancing work. Let's say you build a web app and need it to be globally accessible with minimal downtime. In cloud engineering, you'd use a load balancer to distribute traffic across multiple servers, making your app more resilient and scalable. These are things you might not have dealt with as a software developer, but they're essential in cloud. Having at least a basic understanding of Linux is also important. Even if you come from a Windows background, you're likely to be exposed to Linux-based systems in cloud environments. Many cloud services such as virtual machines, containers, and serverless functions often run on Linux. You don't need to become a Linux expert, but knowing how to navigate the terminal, manage files, and understand basic commands will make your work in cloud much easier. A good way to get familiar is by running a Linux virtual machine on your computer and practicing simple tasks. Don't forget about databases. Cloud engineers often work with both SQL, structured, and NoSQL, non-structured databases. For example, if you're working on an e-commerce platform that needs to handle thousands of transactions, you might use a SQL database like Azure SQL or a NoSQL solution like Amazon DynamoDB to store and retrieve data quickly and efficiently. And you should be familiar and know how to use both of those. Lastly, learn about cloud-native services like AWS Lambda or Azure Functions, also known as serverless computing, which we already talked about before. These services allow you to run code without managing any servers at all. Imagine this. A user uploads a file to a cloud storage and you want to send them a notification. With a serverless function, you can automatically trigger this process without needing a dedicated server. It's a super efficient way to automate tasks, and as a developer, it's easy to grasp. Essentially, it's just a function deployed in the cloud to handle a specific task. Simple yet powerful. Security is a critical aspect of cloud engineering. In the cloud, you're often working with sensitive data, and protecting that data is key. Unlike traditional development, there might be a separate team handling security. In cloud engineering, security is part of your job. A good example is identity and access management, or IAM. Let's say you're building a cloud app that multiple people on your team need to access. With IAM, you control who has access to what. You can grant specific permissions, so that one team member can access a database, but another can only view logs. In AWS, this is done through IAM roles and policies. In Azure, the same is done through role-based access control, or RBAC. These controls ensure that only the right people have access to critical resources. Encryption is another must. Data in the cloud should be encrypted both at rest, when it's stored, and in transit, when it's moving from one place to another. For example, when storing files in an AWS S3 bucket or Azure Blob Storage, you can enable server-side encryption to automatically encrypt data before it's stored. It's also important to stay updated on security threats. A well-known example is the Capital One data breach in 2019, where misconfigured firewalls exposed sensitive information. As a cloud engineer, you'll need to implement best practices like multi-factor authentication, or MFA, using the principle of least privilege, which is only giving users the permissions they absolutely need, and regularly monitoring infrastructure for vulnerabilities. While hands-on experience is critical, certifications are a great way to validate and refresh your skills. Popular cloud certifications include AWS Certified Solutions Architect and Azure Solutions Architect. Both have associate and expert level certifications. These certifications test your knowledge of cloud architecture, security, networking, and more. For example, when preparing for the AWS Solutions Architect exam, you learn about designing fault-tolerant and scalable architectures, such as setting up Amazon EC2 instances across multiple availability zones for better uptime. In the real world, this knowledge can help you design systems that can handle traffic spikes without crashing. Certifications also expose you to services you might not use every day or might not never used at all. For instance, while studying for the Azure Architect certification, you might learn about Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, even if you don't use Kubernetes in your current role. This broader knowledge base will make you more versatile and adaptable. Remember, certifications don't replace hands-on experience, but they provide a structured learning path and help you stay up to date with new services and best practices. DevOps is essential in cloud engineering because it bridges development and operations, helping teams build, test, and deploy faster. As a cloud engineer, you'll need to manage infrastructure as code, automate deployments, and monitor systems. A real-world example is using a CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline to automate your code deployments. Let's say you've built a web app. With tools like Jenkins or Azure DevOps, you can automate the process of testing and deploying new versions of your app. This means every time you push new code, it's automatically tested and deployed without manual intervention. This reduces errors, speeds up development, and ensures a smoother workflow. You'll also need to manage containerized applications using tools like Docker and Kubernetes. For instance, if you're working on a microservices architecture, you might use Docker to containerize your app and Kubernetes to orchestrate and manage those containers. This allows your app to scale dynamically based on demand. And you can learn more about Kubernetes and Docker if you want. It's all up to you. DevOps is all about automation and efficiency. Mastering these skills will help you build cloud environments that are reliable, scalable, and easy to maintain. As a cloud engineer, strong communication skills are just as important as technical expertise. You'll often need to explain complex technical concepts to non-technical stakeholders, like business leaders or project managers. For example, imagine you're proposing a new cloud solution to a business team. They might not care about technical details, but they'll want to know how the solution will save costs or improve performance. And that's a pretty common scenario. Being able to translate technical jargon into simple, actionable benefits is important. You'll also need to collaborate closely with different teams, such as security, development, and operations. Good communication ensures everyone is on the same page and that projects run smoothly. Whether it's writing clear documentation or leading meetings, your ability to communicate effectively will set you apart as a cloud engineer. Those are the 5 big factors to think about when switching to cloud engineering. Now, let's dive into 2 quick tips that'll make your journey a whole lot smoother. If you've never worked with any of the major cloud platforms, don't just dive into studying theory right away. You'll miss the big picture and end up taking the long road to understanding. Instead, get your hands dirty first. Here is what I suggest. Your coding skills are your secret weapon in cloud engineering, especially when it comes to automating infrastructure. Start by learning some cool tools like Terraform or Azure Resource Manager. These are infrastructure as code tools, which let you manage cloud resources using, you guessed it, code. Think of it like this. You could write a simple Terraform script that spins up an AWS EC2 instance. Boom! You've just deployed a virtual machine using code. Not only do you learn how cloud infrastructure works, but you also figure out how to automate the process. This means less clicking around and more smooth, error-free deployments down the road. Automation is your new best friend. The best way to learn cloud engineering? Jump in with both feet. Pick a simple project like deploying a web app to Azure or AWS. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just get something up and running in the cloud. Once you got that going, you can start adding more cool stuff like database or a load balancer to handle traffic. In my opinion, building your own project for hands-on experience is seriously underrated. It helps you see how all the different cloud services work together, and you'll get the hang of the cloud environment faster than you'd think. And trust me, when things go wrong, because they definitely will, don't freak out. That's where the magic happens. Every mistake is just a learning opportunity, so roll with the punches and learn from the hiccups. The more mistakes you make, the more you're going to learn. You should look at it that way. Making the switch to cloud engineering is an exciting journey, and I hope this video has given you a clearer path forward. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just dive in and start building now, and keep learning as you go. You've got this. That's it for today's video. Let me know in the comments which cloud platform you prefer, AWS, Azure, or Google, and why. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future tech breakdowns. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.